Live from Atlanta, Georgia, it's the Zach Ballinger Show, where we help you find your direction through passion and purpose. My name is Zach Ballinger. I'm your host. Thank you guys so much for joining us. 2 ways you can get a hold of the show: Zach at ZachBallinger.com. Email in those questions. We'll make sure to ask them to me and my guests. Also, if you're out there on YouTube, you can follow us live there. We are streaming there. Please enter those questions into the comment box. We'll make sure to engage. Without further ado, Jerry, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Oh, man. Thank you, Zach, for having me on. I love the intro video. It's great.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That's a new addition to the show. So you're the guinea pig, if you will.
All right.
So, Jerry, I know you've had an extensive background being a firefighter and a paramedic, and we've had some of those questions come in. Can you talk to us about those two particular type careers today?
Yeah, I've been a firefighter for over 32 years now. I started out in just 1990 as an EMT and in a little small town. Take your EMT class. It's a very short, basic class on how to be a first responder with a little bit of basic care. And then I slowly started building up my education to get more and more in-depth training into EMS. And at the same time, I built that fire side of things too. My career's been unique in the fact that I started out as a volunteer. I went to part-time and then from part-time to a career department. And even when I was at a career department, I still worked some volunteer and part-time too. It's a great job. I mean, it doesn't take a ton of education initially to get in the beginning, but then it takes, just some constant education as you get in and go.
Do you recommend that? I know for a lot of the small towns, to be a firefighter, they usually have a volunteer type service. How do you recommend people to start off? Let's say you've got a high school student out there. They're like, I've always dreamed to be a firefighter. Where would you begin? Would you volunteer, start that route, or education, or can you walk us through that?
Yeah, you can actually do a little bit of both. A lot of volunteer agencies need bodies, and they will be certainly willing to train you, especially if they're short on bodies. And I think that's just a great place to start because you're building your education. You're also working with your teammates, there at the same time. And, that's even if there's Explorer programs out there that kids can take to get into the fire service. But really, honestly, you can be any age and, really get into the volunteer fire service and help your community and make a huge difference by doing that.
And talk to us about what you loved about being a firefighter or an EMT. I think it's kind of cool. We can talk to you about both of the careers since we do have the audience maybe wanting to go into different ones. But what did you love about each?
Well, the EMS is great. It's just there's a large adrenaline rush when you get that call and you get to the scene and you're really helping people on their worst day. But honestly, firefighting is really the same thing too. Most of those programs are married together in agencies. So your firefighters and your EMS workers are basically one. There are some very large cities where they do contracting to ambulances and they run just ambulance calls. They just run all the medicals. They may show up to a fire call, but they don't get dressed and go into the fire. So, there are fewer jobs just being paramedics and EMTs on an ambulance than there are being a firefighter and EMT. So usually if you want to do this as a career, you have to kind of do both.
Gotcha. Now, this is probably going to seem like a really dumb question for you because I think our audience probably thinks they can guess, but what's some of the difficulty or challenges? Obviously you're running into a burning building, you're putting yourself in danger, but talk us through that because I think people need to really understand before they start down this road what this could end up.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think you really kind of need to explore going into this first. Even if you're just exploring by going and doing the ride alongs or showing up to the police station, fire station, in different community uh, stations and stuff like that, and even if you're traveling around the country, stop in and get to know the people and talk to them. But there is something to the job about going somewhere where you don't really know what you're going to be. We get dispatched to a medical emergency or a fire emergency, and a lot of times the details that we have aren't great details. So we're working it out when we get there, and that's very challenging and very rewarding to help people through those problems. But it also comes with a big mental toll on us, both mentally and physically. When you go to those calls and they don't turn out the way you want to, and even a fire call, you can go to calls and you try to save somebody's home. You put a lot of work in it. You go to a big wildland call. You're invested. You go there and you're invested into the property. You're invested into the people, and the things that you do and see. If you don't deal with them correctly, you end up with PTSD or other type of issues like that. And as your career goes on, we talk about it. It's a glass of water, and you just keep filling it up with calls and calls and calls, and eventually you'll go to a call and it may not seem to be anything, and then it just overfills your cup. And that's, generally the times that you end up really needing to see medical help or mental help, seeing a therapist or something like that. I've personally been doing this for a really long time. I thought that there wasn't really anything that was bothering me, that I could handle most everything that I've gone to. I've seen a lot of terrible things that I don't ever want to see again, but you do. And I've gone to therapy to help me to work through those situations. And I'll be honest with you, some of those situations I never even knew bothered me. There's also just kind of a thing that, when we're traveling through town or areas that we've had calls, I happen to live in the same town that I serve. And when you go by those addresses or intersections and you've had those terrible calls, those calls often come flooding back to you. So you really have to be in check with your physical body and your mental state to balance those out. Firemen tend to be very out of balance. We tend to work a whole lot, and we also take on ever the bad habits of drinking and smoking and things like that to kind of numb down the pain or not deal with the pain. So there's some kind of dangers in that.
Appreciate you being really honest about that. I never thought about that. You see firefighters, you might be driving along and it might just be a simple fender bender. And, like you said, you don't know what's coming in on that other line. Or it may be, hey, building's on fire, people are in it, we got to get you here now. And you really don't have all those details. So it never really occurred to me, you really don't know what you're showing up to a lot of times when you get those calls, and you've always have to be on your game. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I think our dispatchers try to do a lot to help us paint a picture, but they're only painting a picture from what they're getting in on the other side and just their voices. I think that's also an incredibly hard job as a dispatcher. You're taking what pieces you're getting in from the phone and you're trying to relate them to, EMS and firefighters on building them a picture on what they're going to arrive to. Because if they build us the wrong picture or we take in the wrong information, we may not actually have the right tools to show up to do the right job.
Makes sense. Now, somebody emailed in this before, but is there any physical requirements that firefighters, EMTs have to go through once they get certified, qualified, or ever anything like that?
Yeah, most places have what they call a CPAT test, and you can look it up on YouTube and it'll show you what the test is. But most agencies have a minimum standard test. We take our minimum standard test once a year, and we also take what we call the PAC test, which is so we can go out and fight wildland fires. So they're two different tests. I really feel like most people could pass those if you just really put your time into watching what the video is and getting yourself into shape. For me, being in shape is a must all through my career. I've been doing this, like I said, a long time, but I never want to feel like I can't go in that building and save somebody, or I can't save my partner. I think that would just be a horrible feeling. I know some other firefighters may be less passionate about it because you can see that in how they take care of their body, but some of them are actually surprisingly still pretty fit. They may not look like it, but they are. But yeah, you got to maintain the physical fitness standard. And I'm not sure that really any country or any cities in the country that don't have a standard right now.
Gotcha. Now let's take you back. We're going to put you in a time machine, and you're pretty young, so we won't have to go that far in the time machine. But let's take you back to second, third, fourth grade. Did you have a dream career as a child that you dreamed of doing?
Well, that is pretty interesting. So I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. I actually walked by the fire station every day when I was in kindergarten, first grade. I'd walk with my brothers, and the people at the fire station were out, always seemed like they were always out talking to us, polishing the trucks, having a great time, just super friendly. I did end up meeting a kid in school that was special needs, and I became great friends with him, and his dad was a paramedic. And so I'd be playing at his house. The fire engine and the medics would stop by and say hi. So I think early on there was just something there. I love just talking to them, the service and the kindness that they showed me. And I had that dream in there for a while, and then I just kind of left it to like look at other things. And it really took me back into my mid-20s before I was like, I really want to do this as a career. So I'm going to put in the effort to do it.
And I asked, we didn't even talk before the show, but I think sometimes it's either there or it's hidden. And what I mean by that, I encourage people to look back on their past, see if there's overlapping themes, overlapping skills, overlapping, and bingo, for you, it was right there the whole time. I think also a lot of us grow up as kids dreaming to be firefighters or cops. And then when we get older, we're like, oh, no. And we see, what you guys have to deal with. But others, if you still have that passion lingering on, like you said, I love your example. You said when you were in your 20s, it still was lingering on, that was kind of a calling of yours more than just a childhood dream.
Yeah. And interesting enough, in school and in a few years later in the third and fourth grade, I was really struggling. I'm not a great speller. I'm not a great reader. I still struggle with that. I have some dyslexia and things like that I deal with. And I think a lot of firemen honestly do. But it was just like when it came to doing first aid stuff and being engaged in that way, those issues became a lot less. So it's kind of fascinating that way. But that was just like one area when I was really struggling young that I really could excel in.
So glad you brought that up. I meet college students, even millennials. I ask them what they're good at, and a lot of times they say, well, I'm not really good at anything. And that's just simply not true. It's just mean you haven't found what you're good at yet. And it's up to us to find that. And it may take some work. It may take several years. It may take a lot of extra work, but that's for us to find that. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because that is a skill that you have, that ability to act in an emergency, in a split moment decision where it's life or death, and you've been able to do it for this many years and still come out on the other side. Obviously, you count your blessings for that, some of that, but also a lot of that's intuition, right? Where that's a skill that people have.
Yeah, it truly is. You do have to really listen to your gut. I've gone to thousands and thousands of hours of training, and I still will pick up on things that, from one training I had 10 years ago to a new training now, that I still pick up and hear things. But in the heat of the moment of the call, you do really got to, just go with that gut feeling and make decisions. I mean, and if this decision is not right, we have to adjust and, realign ourselves and go back at it. But it's a constant learning process. That's just one thing about this job, is you will never stop learning.
Awesome. Now, when you go back to your days when you were doing both firefighter and EMT, this is, again, for this type of profession, it sounds like such a silly question, but what was a typical day like? If somebody, because I always encourage people to do job shadowing, follow somebody around for a week to see what it's like to be in their shoes. But walk us to your typical day in the morning, and then somebody left with you at night. What does that look like?
Yes, for me, actually, my day starts the night before. So this is just kind of how I am. I just and I think a lot of firefighters and paramedics are the same way, is I start the night before. I make sure I have everything prepped. I work 48 hours on, and I work and I'm off for 96. So that night, I make sure I have a good night's sleep. I have all my stuff packed to be there for 2 days. and I show up in the morning, and we show up in the morning no later than 15 minutes early. That's just a thing for us. And we show up and we have what we call a debriefing, and the off-coming shift is debriefing on what they were going to do, and I'm briefing my guys on kind of what we're going to do for the day. So that morning, about half hour where our crews overlap a little bit. We do a lot of information sharing. We get dressed and ready for the day. Each of our rigs have to be checked out, anything that we're using. So that's a detailed check of our medications, from tires to oil and all that, to make sure that we're operationally ready. Once we have that done, we do PT. PT is really huge in our department. Like, our chief wants us doing that each day, and we will make time to do that within a day. So we PT for about an hour, and then we can do training after that. Sometimes if we're like physically and sweaty and ready to get some work done and training wise, like, we'll put on the rest of our gear and we'll go out and do some fire training. And if not, we'll get ready and do some shopping or inspections for the day, eat our lunch, and then honestly, it's either more training, or we're out doing business inspections, going to the schools. We like to really engage in the schools and do education that way. So our bottom half of our day is really kind of like business training and things like that. It's, for our particular department, there's just not a lot of time where we sit down. There's not downtime. Other departments that run more calls than we do, they may sit down because they're going to be up all night and they need to get some little rest, when they can. But that's kind of how, so that'll take us until 5 o'clock. We always eat lunch and dinner together at our department. That's just the thing. We like to have a family atmosphere. So after lunch and dinner, we clean, and then we'll maybe have some downtime where we can just relax and kind of hang out, watch a movie sometimes, or if not, we're running calls and, just helping each other out with studying and things like that. So it's a lot busier than I think sometimes it appears to be from the outside.
Yeah, from the outside, because I've never done it. It just, I just always thought, hey, well, they're sitting in the firehouse waiting on a call. And I think the movies have kind of, shown that too. Like, people are sitting around, like, watching a TV. But it sounds like you're training really the whole day until you get a call.
Yeah. Calls are kind of like, we don't set time aside for calls. We just plug them in as they come, and we're trying to get all the other stuff done. In our department, we're kind of still smaller, so we still have to go and check all the hydrants. There's always just something to be done for the citizens.
Amazing. Now, people think of firefighters as you put out fires. Talk about every different calls that you get that we may not even think of. I think of wrecks and I think fires. What else am I missing?
Yeah, so for a full-time department like we are, where we do have, I'm a paramedic, I'm also the fire captain, so I go to all the calls. So any EMS and fire call, we go to those calls. So particularly for us, we go out and fight wildland fires on the bases and lower parts of the mountains. We have a lake, so we do lake rescue calls and water rescue calls, ice rescue calls. It just really, there's this, anytime somebody needs 911, for anything, they really call. We've had people trapped down in sewer drains, on top of buildings. It's really just, when in doubt, that's the service they call. Yes, there's been cats stuck in trees. We don't get those out generally. They generally come down, but yes, that does happen. But don't burden the 911 service for that. But there are some people do. That means they're very, a lot to them, and so they're going to call.
Wow. Yeah. I don't, you been stuck in an elevator, you just always see fire trucks everywhere. So I think we missed the boat on a lot of those calls that you might get, or, those real bad car wrecks where people are stuck, or, there could be, what about a bomb threat? I'm sure you guys are called to those too. I'm sure you're not there to disable the bomb, but in case something burns, right?
Right. Something burns, explodes, somebody gets hurt. Yeah, there is really not something that doesn't happen emergency wise that we're not there. It could be flooding too. We go to flooding calls. It's really a service where all of your skills are going to be put to the test. And a lot of guys have skills that are, outside the fire. We have great welders, we have great builders of things, and those skills actually come into play on calls. We get people out that are trapped in furniture and stuff like that, and disassemble, heavy machinery to get people out. It's just, there's not one, we don't have like a typical call that we go on. Generally, for most cities though, the actual fire calls are a lower percentage than the actual medical calls. And firemen go onto the medical calls because in our particular agency, we do have paramedics. We have all our EMS gear on our fire rigs. And so we go to the call with the ambulance to assist. So that's kind of why you see a lot of times you'll see a fire truck and an ambulance at somebody's house just for a medical call. And it's manpower. Sometimes we have people that are down in basements that weigh, more than 2 men or women could pick up and take out of the basement. So we have them there for manpower. What we call like a full rest. If we have someone that has a heart attack, their heart stops, they stop breathing. That takes really 4 or 5 guys to do a great job. And we are really all in on something, doing something on that type of call to make sure that person has the best chance to survive.
That's great. That's great to know. So thank you so much. And let's get to some of these questions that you guys have sent in. The first question comes in. It says, I'm debating about whether to be an ER nurse or paramedic EMT. What's the best way? How do I choose between those particular pathways?
Well, they're both great. They're both get to see the emergency medicine side of things. ER nurse gets to be part of that emergency medicine after you're the paramedic and bring them in. This is the way I would suggest to do it. I think being a paramedic would be a great job. You do that, you make a little bit less money than a nurse, but you'll have enough free time. If you want to go to nursing, you can do that. Or if you want to even go levels be higher than that, sometimes the departments will support you to do that and will pay you to do that. So I like the action, being in the action. I've been an ER tech kind of like some of my paramedic rides and stuff like that I've done. It's fun. It's just not as fun as being on scene.
It's a great idea, actually, just to, you can get right into it and get your education. Why not do both? So great idea. The next question comes in. It says, what is the most traumatic experience you've been in as a firefighter / EMT?
I guess that traumatic could be, various things. Personally, in my career, I have yet to deliver a baby that's been healthy and alive. Those have always been very traumatic calls. I've been on my last traumatic call was like that. Was just we dispatched to a call where we think the baby is going to be alive, and actually the woman's giving birth, and the baby comes out dead, and then we're trying to revive it, and it's a lot for us. It's a lot for the family, especially when you think that the results are going to be different when you arrive there, and they're not. And it really, pediatric stuff really weighs heavy on all of our hearts. Some of the calls I remember the most have to do with pediatrics.
Gotcha. Thanks for sharing that. Next question. I think this is a really good question. It asked about the longevity of a career as a firefighter. Obviously, you can't do this into real retirement age. How many years does the average firefighter work?
So a lot of agencies have a 20-year minimum. So you have to put in your 20 years, and then you'll get about 50% of your pension, your top 3 years of salary. Other cities do 25 years, and some people choose to stay 30. I personally thought I was going to do 20, and then COVID hit. And so I've stayed around a lot longer than I thought I would be. But yeah, you can, depending on where you're at in the world, really is how long you're going to be, have to work. And that's why it's so important to keep your body physically in shape and your mind, and to take this long career.
Next question comes in. It says, obviously you have a very high stress job. How do you manage that stress and continue to live a normal life?
Well, normal life is probably a little bit hard to say. I feel like just coming home and, doing my job and stuff like that, I don't think there's really too much normalcy to it when you're leaving 2 days and, gone for 4, and the stresses of just because work for 2 days, off for 4. Just because I'm gone, family life is still going on. And so that is very stressful to be at work and then just trying to do a family life. I'm trying to do a work life. The balance just really comes in just knowing yourself. I spent a lot of time knowing myself. I honestly was in a deep, dark place where I thought about committing suicide because I wasn't managing my stress very well. And everything I thought was who I was a fireman. And that's just what I do for work. I do that for work. I'm still a dad. I'm still a husband. I'm still a brother. All those things, you have to focus in on those things and be really involved into being outside, being with your family, doing the things that you continue to love. If you don't do those, you lose your resilience in this career. All those little dark things that you see and go and do, it does weigh heavy on you. I feel like getting in to see some type of therapy is also highly recommended. It's very still low on the scale of what people want to do in this profession. But I think there's just something great about talking to somebody about maybe your problems or doing different types of therapy that are going to help let your brain process of what you've seen, because we weren't made to see these things. Like, no one wants to see them. No one was really set up, in their lives to have a great process in place to see those. I think a lot of times we're a lot tougher than we really are.
Jerry, I'm so glad you hit on that because, I talk about teenage bullying and speak very openly on mental health awareness around bullying in high school. And, the leading cause of death in North America is actually with teenagers, the age of 18 to 24 is teenage suicide. And if we're not willing as men to talk openly about our mental health feelings because of these stigmas, then we're never going to get the help we deserve. So I appreciate you being bold and brave about bringing that up. We need more people to do that, be outspoken and realize that, having anxiety, having stress, being sad, being depressed, you should talk openly about these, and there shouldn't be a stigma around counseling or, cool people, trust me, still get a lot of counseling. A lot of professionals I know get help when they need it. And so I just appreciate you mentioning that and opening that up in a personal angle. Tell us about Enduring the Badge. Now, you've got this great show. It's become really popular. Tell us about some of the stuff you've got going on.
It is a great show. And it's I used to own an apparel company, and I love just making connections with people and firefighters and the first responders that support that world. But it wasn't really enough. I wanted to really make a connection with other first responders. And this is allowing me to do that. Enduring the Badge podcast is interviewing first responders, hopefully around the world, just in the United States for right now, and just sharing their stories, because so many of them, outside of being first responders, have the coolest stories that they've overcome. And I feel like when you listen to things like that, it helps just make you a little bit more aware of how you can be better as a person and overcome these just trials and tribulations that we have in our lives, because we all have them. And we all need, maybe somebody's different version of having them, or something that they said, I think, just triggers you to go maybe a little bit farther than you would go, or be just aware of that. Crap, I am having this problem. I just heard this other person have it. And now I don't feel so bad that I have it. I'm not alone. So I think it's just that part I love the most. And I feel like it's when you can be part of things like you're being part of, just life-changing things are amazing. Like when you can share people's stories and careers and things like that, it fills me up inside. And I'm just the catalyst, right, to make all these great things happen on the podcast.
Awesome. So where can they go to find your show? You have a website, or just do they need to do a Google search, or what do you have for them?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. Me just personally, it's Jerry Fire and Fuel on Instagram, or you can follow Enduring the Badge on Instagram. It's just Enduring the Badge. And also I have a website. It's enduringthebadgepodcast.com.
enduring the badge podcast.com.
Yeah,
We'll make
a real
sure to
long
link
one.
we'll make sure to link to that into the comments. Jerry, this has been so insightful, so inspiring, and so motivating. We really do appreciate you coming on, giving back some of your time. We know you're extremely busy, and our audience is really grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate being on here.